LUMIX L10 takes almost everything I love about a little fixed lens camera like my Fujifilm X100V, and then does one thing the Fuji can't: it zooms. And I've genuinely been back and forth on whether I prefer a zoom lens or a prime lens on a little camera like this. And somewhere amongst the middle of that, this little thing did something I wasn't expecting. It got me shooting stills again on a LUMIX body properly for the first time in years. So I was planning to focus mostly on video in this video, but I actually want to talk about the combination of stills and video in a LUMIX L10 because it offers such a strong combination of features. And I think the overall experience of using this camera may finally pull me away from my little Fujifilm X100V. Let's get into it. The LUMIX L10 is basically a premium compact, everyday carry style camera. It's got a fixed lens and it's a zoom, so not a single focal length like we might find on the X100V. It's a Leica designed 24-75 equivalent, so it's a micro four thirds camera. Wide open, this lens can go to a 1.7 at the widest focal length, and then it stops down to 2.8 as being its fastest when you zoom in. So inside this is a micro four thirds sensor. It's the same sensor that turned up in the GH7, which I really rated as a camera. And it's kind of interesting to see such a kind of powerful video-centric sensor turning up in this tiny little body, because it's got some serious video tech in it. And that's combined with LUMIX's excellent autofocus, decent battery life, it has a hot shoe, it doesn't have any IBIS, but it does have some stabilisation. We'll talk about that later. There's no HDMI. It takes an SD card, single SD card. It has a single standard rotating flippy screen, and it does have a proper EVF, which is fantastic. And the price range sits around £1,500, $1,500. Which drops it right in the territory of that kind of Fujifilm X100V VI premium compact camera. For a camera of this size, the video offering is ridiculously good. It's a little bit crazy what you're getting in this little thing. So it can record up to 5.6K, I think that's in 79, up to 60p, and that's uncropped. And then you can also get a downsampled 5.2K open gate that goes up to 30p. And then you get 4K up to 120 frames a second. Now, the slow motion above 60 frames a second, the quality does suffer a little bit, but it's still perfectly acceptable, still looks fantastic. And of course, you're getting everything available in that nice, beautiful, chunky Vlog 10-bit codec. Everything above the 4K resolution you're getting as like 420, and then in 4K and under, it's available as a nice chunky 422 10-bit codec. And I also had a real soft spot for shooting open gate on this little camera. If you think of this camera, the L10, as a kind of social first camera, which is exactly how I reckon a lot of people will use it. That taller open gate frame is just brilliant for social delivery. It's a lovely aspect ratio to push straight onto places like Instagram, and you've got the room to kind of pull both vertical and horizontal crops out of it. It's just a great little all-round content creation, social first camera, and I think the inclusion of open gate was quite smart here. Now, the camera doesn't have any anamorphic features, there's no D-squeeze, but I guess if you wanted to, you could still add an anamorphic adapter onto the front of the lens. I don't know how safe it would be in terms of the weight of that on the zoom. And the lens is really nice as well, especially for video. It's interesting working with a fixed zoom lens. I'm not kind of used to that. I mean, I'm obviously used to working with zoom lenses, but having this built-in lens that's really tiny, that's wide enough to use, and it's also fast at its sort of widest zoom range. It's really interesting, and it allows you to get some really nice dramatic shots. It's really fun moving the camera around at the wider focal lengths, wide open. At 1.7, you're perfectly able to get beautiful subject separation and sort of blur out your background. And as always, Vlog is an absolute pleasure to grade. It's very flexible in post. Everything that you see in this video will be graded with my LUMIX Hackney LUTs and Powergrade. There'll be a link to it down in the description if you want to pick those up. You can either buy it as a Powergrade or a LUT pack. But again, I never had any problems working with this footage. The dynamic range seemed to be fantastic. I wasn't really struggling with exposure. And I think it offers like professional grade video recording capabilities in a really small, dinky form factor. So it's kind of interesting having this level of video competence in such a small little camera. And it doesn't really feel like Lumix has held back or limited this camera when it comes to video quality. So this camera doesn't have IBIS, and I think when the first previews of this camera dropped, I was a little bit concerned that a dinky little camera without IBIS was going to struggle to get decent looking footage. But I was wrong, because the camera has optical image stabilisation, so its stabilisation is basically built into its lens, and it works really well. But the camera also has Lumix's excellent electronic stabilisation, E-stabilisation, which you can layer on top of the OIS to get additional stabilization support, and it works really well, as you would expect from Lumix. I guess most of the time I was just using the OIS, and then when I wanted to get sort of like rock solid stable shots at the longer end of the zoom, then on occasion I would use the electronic stabilization as well. But it's good to experiment and see what works for you. Although it's great and it's super useful to have in this camera, it's never going to give you that same level of performance that you see in Lumix's dedicated IBIS system. With more aggressive camera movement, it will begin to show its limitations with more jitteriness and camera shake. But one of the benefits of having optical image stabilization is that there wasn't that telltale IBIS wobble that you get with an IBIS system that is behind the lens and not built into it. If you pick up this camera, you will also most likely need an ND solution, and that's because its mechanical shutter tops out at 1/2000th of a second. It's great, it has a mechanical shutter, but this is a bit of a limitation in bright daylight. You'll probably see from this footage that I have a bit of a funny looking filter setup, and that's just because I've adapted my existing larger ND and VND filters to the L10's tiny lens, which does thankfully have a filter thread. It's 43mm. I found myself using my Nissi Freestop ND filter when I was shooting stills, which worked great. But when I was shooting video, then I'd usually also have to add a VND on top of this. The only issue with this is that I found myself regularly swapping these filters on and off when quickly changing between stills and video, and over the course of a day that did become a bit of a frustration. And if you attach certain filters too tightly, the camera also gets a little bit unhappy when you turn it off and retract the zoom lens. Overall, it didn't ruin my experience with the L10, but it's just one of those little frustrations that you have to put up with when you're out shooting with it. So while the video experience on this camera is kind of what you would expect from a Lumix offering, it's full throttle, it's fully featured, it's very competent, and it gives you a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't expect to see in this camera, it was actually the stills that kept me reaching for this camera. So I took this camera on holiday to Gallipoli in Italy, and yes, I shot plenty of video whilst out there, but I expected to shoot more. But by the end of the week, more often than not, it was stills that I was going out to capture. And I just loved spending time with this camera, going out on my own for a little, hour on my own each day, listening to some music, walking around and taking photos. And of course, this camera has an EVF. One of the reasons why I just didn't really get into the Lumix S9 is because it lacks a viewfinder, and that's ultimately why I chose the Fuji X100V, which has both an electronic and optical viewfinder. For me, I'm old school. That's just how I prefer taking pictures on a small compact camera like this, and I'm so pleased that Lumix managed to add one. Massive shout out to Ross and his JPEGs. When I got this camera to test, the first thing I did was went on Ross's website, watched a bunch of his videos, and pretty much went straight to his Portrait 800 look, which pretty much stayed dialed in to my camera over the week that I took it on holiday to Italy. And I absolutely love the look of the stills that I got with this, and it's probably this look that Ross generated that kind of won me over in terms of shooting with this camera, pulling me away from the Fuji X100V. So originally I started off capturing in both RAW and JPEG like most of us do, as a safety net, but within a day or two I kind of realized something, like I just didn't need the RAWs. Like I wasn't pulling them into Lightroom and wanting to do lots of editing with them. The straight out of camera JPEGs look fantastic. This is one of the aspects that I love in my Fuji X100V, that I can dial, something in like a portrait film look, and then just go out and shoot some JPEGs, pull them straight off the camera and upload them to socials. And the LUMIX ecosystem goes a little bit further with this, of what you can do in terms of dialing in looks in camera. Not only can you tweak stuff like highlights, shadows, contrast, saturation, and add grain and all the usual stuff like that, but you can also combine those settings with LUTs. And not just one LUT, you can stack up to 2 LUTs at the same time alongside all of those other custom settings. You can't use LUTs in Fuji cameras, and it gives you so much flexibility, versatility to really dial in looks. Like each day you could dial in and put in a new look and have a go shooting it. And I think sort of rediscovering the camera each time you do that, because you get home and it's not down to you sitting in Lightroom, it's getting it right in the moment and pulling these looks straight off camera and having them ready to go in terms of posting onto socials. I've been making these long camera reviews for years now, and one of the biggest elements I focus on when making these videos is music. Everything you're hearing in this video comes from Epidemic Sound, which is today's sponsor. And I think what's really important to me is that all of their music is made by real artists who get paid for their work. But Epidemic is more than just a music library, it's a curation and customization platform. So I rely heavily on their search tools to find music quickly, particularly Assistant, where you can literally just type and describe exactly what you're looking for and it'll return a selection of tracks. So I usually create a project and then use individual playlists for each of the chapters in my video. Sometimes I might need to split a track into individual stems or adjust it using Epidemic's super useful adapt feature, where you can retime or remix tracks to suit your project. You can check out Epidemic Sound with a free trial and get 50% off your first 2 months with my exclusive code ED50. So check out the link in the description down below and start soundtracking your projects today. So I have complicated feelings about this. I think on a small everyday camera, I think I do generally prefer a fixed focal length prime lens. It's just a bit more simple. I think it's just how maybe my head works. I find it easier, it's less chaotic. With a fixed lens, you kind of just develop that second sense, that automatic sense of what the frame's going to look like in your head whilst you're composing. With a zoom, stuff becomes more chaotic because there are just like endless possibilities. And sometimes I think maybe that can get in the way of stuff, perhaps. It creates like that friction. But then on the other hand, a zoom is just undeniably more useful. And with my X100V, there are constantly times and shots where I just couldn't get them. I couldn't quite nail them because I'm locked to that one focal length. The focal range of the lens also feels perfect. It's an 11 to 34mm lens, which is a 24 to 75 equivalent on full frame. I never felt like I needed to go wider. At 24mm, it does feel nice and wide, and that 1.7 aperture at 24mm is really, really nice, especially in video. You can also use a digital zoom, which uses a sensor crop to further extend just beyond 200mm. I found going just a little bit was nice, but if you go too far on this, the image does fall apart a little bit, gets a bit softer and noisier. But overall, it's a really, really powerful all-in-one solution if you want to travel light without the compromises of a fixed lens. The L10 just allowed me to capture things I'd normally never be able to. So it allowed me to stand further back, reach into the distance, reframe on the fly. But the problem, I think, is also that the L10's zoom is so slow to deploy, like turning on the camera and then off and waiting for it to go out and go in. And also if you need to go from wide to tight, it just takes a long time. And that again is additional friction when you're out and about using the camera. So I guess that's maybe the price you have to pay for the extra versatility you get with the zoom. The camera looks really nice like this. It looks really neat and it looks like, similar to my X100V, but this is not how the camera ever looks when you're using it. When you turn it on, even at the widest focal length, the zoom is always going to be deployed. This is definitely where I prefer the form factor of a camera like the X100V. It's just much neater and smaller. Whereas with the L10, and I was, walking around, the deployed zoom all the time felt a bit clumsy, whether I had the camera on a strap or I was just holding it in my hand. I felt like I regularly wanted to power it off more frequently than I would with something like the X100V. So although it adds versatility, it also adds friction. I wouldn't say it was a deal breaker for me, It was more just like, you know, came with the territory. It was a little bit annoying. LUMIX Lab, if you don't know, is an app that Lumix have been developing over the last few years. So it connects to the camera, you can preview all your shots. So if you're on holiday and you want to travel light and you want to leave your laptop at home, this facilitates that. And that's really important, I think, for a camera like this, that's meant to be fun, personable, and take you away from work. So if you want to sit down and properly and professionally edit your photos and shoot in RAW, you can absolutely still do that with the LUMIX L10. But if you just want to bounce a few stills onto your socials whilst you're traveling or out and about, it is a very, very good way of doing that. And that's a reduction in friction for me. And I think that's the whole thing I'm looking for in a camera like this. This experience is really going to encourage me to go back and start using LUMIX Lab on my other larger LUMIX cameras to make use of it. I just want to show you one of the things I have picked up whilst using the L10 this week. You'll see here that the buttons come right to the edge of the camera. And that's a bit of a problem because when you're sort of normally operating the camera, your palm and your thumb are going to be here, and inevitably they're just going to start knocking these buttons. And I found that I'm continuously hitting this play button when I'm operating this camera in a rush. If you look at the Fuji X100V, it's pretty different. You have this nice spacing and gap here, so your thumb can just rest naturally and you're not going to be interfering or knocking any of those buttons when you don't want to. And it's just one of the very subtle things I've noticed whilst using the L10 this week. Because this camera has an EVF, I regularly found that when the monitor was open on the back and I was using the EVF, like my nose, maybe because I was sweaty, was constantly changing the focus box on the monitor when I didn't want it to. So I often found myself having to flip the screen back and close it, which was a bit frustrating. It's not something that happens on my Fuji. Then I would have just loved a few more dials on this camera. I want to be able to use this camera without having to look at the back. I want dials so I can quickly and intuitively change settings on the fly. Of course, you've got the aperture on the lens, so you can dial that in directly on the lens or keep it in auto mode. So that's not really a problem, but I found like stuff like ISO and stuff and white balance was a bit more fiddly. So there are a few things that I think would have been nice to have had in this camera that didn't show up. So one of them is shutter angle, which I understand why they haven't put it in, but at the same time, they put some really strong video features into it. You know, we've got open gate, we've got high frame rate recording. I just think it would have been really cool to see it. So in terms of connectivity, it's limited. There is a microphone port and a USB port, but there's no HDMI, not even a mini one. So that means HDMI monitors are off the table. And at the moment, it doesn't seem like this camera is supported by LUMIX Flow, which is a shame, because it also limits this camera as kind of like a nice small C camera on a production if you're using it, if you want to use it alongside larger Lumix or Pixis or Blackmagic cameras. It would be a really nice camera just to sit on a gimbal all day, permanently sit on a gimbal. So maybe Flow support arrives down the line via firmware, who knows? It would definitely extend the use case of this camera, it'd be fantastic. It feels like Lumix is sort of updating and evolving its apps month by month, so it's entirely possible we could see that, and if Lumix are watching it, I think definitely it would be cool to see. There seems to be a group of people that immediately switch off as soon as they hear the term micro four thirds. They just switch off. And I'm just not going to entertain those kind of arguments because I think micro four cameras are legitimate. I think they take brilliant stills. I think they're brilliant stills cameras, and I think they can be used for fantastic results with video. There's plenty of flexibility for background separation, you know, when you want it. And I think also it's important to realize that the X100V, that's a Super 35 sensor. And generally, when I'm using that camera, I'm shooting at an f4 and an f5.6. So there's definitely equivalence here between that sensor and this one. Generally, I'm out and about, you know, street scene, street photography, and you generally want to have more in focus there, I think. And even in portraits, I don't tend to love smearing and smudging the entire background into oblivion. I think what the L10 definitely nails is being like a properly strong hybrid stills and video camera in one and jamming some great features all in a tiny body. And on both fronts, it's well ahead of my little Fuji. Like the video is obviously in another league. It's in another league from the VI as well. And it improves on the Fuji in most categories. Now, on the color side, the LUMIX Lab, the My Photo styles, the stacked LUTs, the stills and video experience, it's just far more powerful and flexible and versatile than the X100V and its recipe system. But I do keep going back to the thought of, what if Lumix had made this a fixed lens, single focal length camera? What happens if it had been an interchangeable lens camera? I think a smaller fixed lens, 30mm equivalent, 28mm equivalent, would have been a bit neater, would have been more streamlined, would have had more people moaning about it. I think the zoom is far more useful. And if they're only going to release one camera like this in this form factor, the zoom makes a lot more sense. I think this is probably one of Lumix's most interesting cameras. Over the last 5 years or so, I've just stopped traveling with my larger mirrorless cameras. I've opted for simpler, smaller cameras. For the last few years, that's been the X100V, but that camera never covered me for video, so it meant I had to bring something else with me, like my DJI Osmo Pocket, which has its own downsides. With the L10, you don't really have to make any compromises. You don't have to deal with a fixed lens. You don't have to give up competent video shooting capability. It does both, and it does both great. And most importantly, it's just a fun camera to use. Big cameras have been great for a long time. People are maybe a little bit fatigued with them, and it's this end of the market where we're actually seeing interesting innovation now, because the tech finally lets us squeeze loads of cool stuff into a camera of this size. Everything from open gate 120 frames recording, up to like 5.6K video recording in 10-bit. It's fantastic. And I think if you are just looking for something that you can chuck in your bag, take great images with, means you can just bring one camera with you. If you're looking to downgrade from a interchangeable lens camera and you're worried about having a fixed focal length camera, then this sorts you out because you've got all the focal lengths available in that zoom. So thanks for watching. There'll be an affiliate link down below, I guess, if you want to pick this camera up. If you can use that, if you're thinking of buying this camera and you find my content useful, that's just a really simple way to support this channel. I get a small commission from that at no additional cost to yourself. All the video in this video was graded with my Hackney LUTs and Powergrade, so you can check those out as well if you like the look of them. It works really well on the LUMIX L10 vlog footage as well. And also don't forget to check out Ross's website, which will also be linked in the description down below. If you've got any questions, as always, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this video. If you're thinking of getting a camera, if you've already got one, what do you think about it? And if you're definitely not going to get one, let me know why, but keep it nice. I'm Ed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.